Following on from my somewhat recent, more comprehensive video explaining every Omnitrix in Ben 10, I thought it was about time we make another comprehensive video on the entire life of Ben Tennyson, going in order of events, obviously starting from when we first meet Ben all the way to his future self. Actually, maybe just for the sake of thoroughness, going back along the family tree a bit, in the early 1960s, Max Tennyson, or Grandpa Max, meets up with an Anodite named Verdona, the pair of them beginning a family, which led to their two kids, Carl and Frank. Frank meeting his wife Natalie and having two kids of their own, those being Ken and the one you're likely more familiar with, Gwen. And then there's Carl, who married Sandra, later resulting in, and to no one's surprise who clicked on this video, Ben. From there, the first 10 odd years of Ben's life were pretty stock standard. Ben grew up in Bellwood, being a comic book, manga, and video game loving kid who's a bit of a menace, but overall a really good kid when it comes down to it. From there, Ben ends up on a summer road trip with Grandpa Max and his cousin Gwen, this leading us to the inciting incident where the Omnitrix comes crashing down to Earth, nearly hitting Ben, resulting in him finding the device, with it attaching itself to his wrist. Then introducing us to our initial 10 classic series aliens, starting with Heat Blast, Wild Mutt, and then Diamond Head. Speaking of, if you're interested to hear about every single alien in the series covered in order, and then ranked in order of my preference, I'll link that video in the description in case you're interested. Back to it though, from there we have the events of the classic series, cycling through Monster of the Week style villains, with the main trio going about their summer road trip. Them facing off against big bads like Vilgax, Kevin 11, Hex, Charmcaster, this mysterious anti-alien villain league called the Forever Knights, though at the time they were more pro-alien tech than they were anti-alien, but important nonetheless. I won't be going too in depth on each and every villain, but there's two worth really focusing in on. There's Kevin, the counterpoint to R. Ben, full name being Kevin Ethan Levin, as in Kevin E11, who'd be revealed to have the mutant ability to absorb all sorts, that being including the DNA inside the Omnitrix, leading to this perfect recurring villain around Ben's age that just feels so grounded in the series, his existence as a villain only really being a result of his encounters with Ben, this culminating in him being an amalgam of all of Ben's initial 10 aliens, before coming back into the story a few times, only to end up being trapped in another dimension called the Null Void. Then there's Vilgax, who we'll get more into later, but he's the biggest bad in the universe, a warlord after the Omnitrix, and Ben's the only thing in his way. Him even having a history with Grandpa Max, but we'll get into that in a moment. Ben goes to really grow as a character from here, having had this enormous universe-altering weight put upon his shoulders at such a young age. Luckily for him and us, he has Gwen to knock the edges off of him, and Grandpa Max as this fantastic parental figure / role model, who'd turn out to be a member of the Plumbers, this intergalactic peacekeeping organisation, giving Ben and us as an audience this insight into everything alien surrounding and beyond the Omnitrix. But back to Gwen for a moment, she ends up developing a bit of an affinity for magic, with her getting a bit of a rogues gallery of her own, her even ending up with a spellbook that she takes with her for the rest of the series. And probably most excitingly at this stage of Ben's life, at least for me, is the additional aliens unlocked after the initial 10. Each of them really adding to his roster of aliens, especially with the new ones having more creature-feeling designs. I'm especially partial to the Halloween trio, like the name suggests, a series of aliens based off of the werewolf, mummy, and Frankenstein's monster. Ben even ends up meeting a version of his future self, well, a version of his future self, but we'll get into that. Ben helping him get back in touch with his humanity over the course of an episode. Ben even ends up facing against the biggest bad in the series, Vilgax, well, actually a few times, ending in their final encounter where Ben, thanks to the creator of the Omnitrix Azimuth, unlocking the biggest, most powerful transformation yet, Waybig. Ben as Waybig then tossing Vilgax into outer space like it was nothing. Now, following the events of Classic, a now 11-year-old Ben unlocks a new alien, Feedback, who quickly becomes Ben's favourite alien, even more so than the likes of Forearms. Put a pin in that, it'll be relevant incredibly shortly. Now on pretty good terms with Azimuth, back on their homeworld, Galvan Prime, one of Upgrade's species who's been corrupted, ends up coming to blows with Ben, getting an upgrade of his own, an unintentional pun but I'm sticking with it, him then going back after Ben, only for him to use his galvanic mechamorph powers to literally rip Feedback out of the Omnitrix, turning him to nothing, traumatizing Ben, who then removed the Omnitrix. Now it's not outright stated why Ben took off the Omnitrix, but I'd say it's a pretty safe assumption that this was the incident responsible. Following that, a 15-year-old Ben's living a pretty normal life. This is up until Grandpa Max goes missing, resulting in Ben putting the Omnitrix back on and getting himself involved with an alien invasion alongside Gwen and a now back to human Kevin. Oh, and probably most importantly, the Omnitrix has, for whatever reason, decided to recalibrate itself updating its visuals to be a more regular looking watch, along with locking away every single alien we've seen up until this point, and giving Ben access to a new roster of 10 aliens to play around with. Each of them tend to have more complex designs and power sets than the original 10. The Forever Knights also make their return in a big way, them being one of the two major antagonistic forces at this stage in Ben's life. The other being the Hybrid and their army of DN aliens. DN aliens being humans transformed by these facehugger style little guys. This is really where Ben does his growing up, taking on the responsibility as a leader and one of the only sole protectors of Earth in Grandpa Max's absence. Alongside Ben, Kevin's gone from largely absorbing energy to exclusively absorbing materials in the vein of the Absorbing Man, and Gwen's spells take a bit of a backseat to make way for mana constructions. Jumping forward a bit with Gwen, we get the Verdona reveal and find out Gwen's mana abilities and magic proficiency are due to being part Anodite and inheriting their Grandma Verdona's alien DNA. Ben and the rest of the family not for whatever reason. Ben and the others then go all over, gathering Plumber's kids, these human-alien hybrids scattered around the place, as allies in this ongoing invasion. That and Ben ends up in a relationship with Julie Yamamoto. And unrelated, but while we're on the topic of Ben meeting people, he befriends Professor Paradox, the Doctor Who stand-in of the series. Then turns out Max has been alive this entire time and has just been sort of laying low, though seemingly sacrifices himself. Turns out though he didn't die and was instead sent to the Null Void, where Ben goes to lend a hand for a bit alongside the Plumber's kids. And then the big alien invasion kicks into full gear, with Ben along with all of his allies facing off against the Hybrid, which would end up with Ben unlocking Master Control, gaining full access to everything the Omnitrix can do, resulting in Ben confronting and having a chat with the Hybrid's higher-ups, finding out the Hybrid as a species are dying out due to the lack of diversity amongst their species. And as such, Ben decides to use the Omnitrix to repair the entire species' DNA, splicing them with trace amounts of every DNA sample in the Omnitrix. On that, I've seen some people point out that if it's completely randomized, there surely has to be at least one hybrid out there with trace bits of Alien X's abilities. For those of you unfamiliar, around this time, Ben is given access to Alien X, an all-powerful alien species that can pretty much do anything they see fit, provided the multiple personalities inside agree on any given decision. Following this absolutely enormous universe-altering event, Ben loses access to Master Control, and not too long after, Vilgax makes his return. Following him travelling from planet to planet, gathering weapons, artifacts, and all sorts, along with absorbing the abilities of 9 superpowered beings, in order to challenge Ben to a fight that would decide the fate of the Earth. And when beaten as Chromastone, rather than dying, Ben reforms his classic alien Diamond Head, who he uses the abilities of to absolutely wipe the floor with Vilgax, despite his many upgrades. Then there's all sorts of side stories and Ben running about the place, and for whatever reason, Ben ends up relearning these same lessons time and time again, particularly in Season 3 of Alien Force. But getting back on track, Vilgax returns to Ben's life again, this time alongside Asma's former assistant Albedo, who upgrades his own version of the Omnitrix into the Ultimatrix, a device like the Omnitrix with the unique ability to evolve each alien transformation into a possible future version of itself, tailored for combat. Which after some scuffling, Vilgax gets his hands on the original Omnitrix, resulting in Ben using the voice commands to set the Omnitrix to self-destruct, destroying it permanently before taking the Ultimatrix for himself. Ben now using this device to best Vilgax again. Following that, Ben and the others end up getting in the middle of series villain Agrigor's plans to kidnap these 5 aliens, who all happen to not be in the Omnitrix, leading to 5 additional aliens for Ben, and a season of running about the place, getting bested by Agrigor time and time again. Leading our main cast into the Forge of Creation with an amalgam Agrigor. Agrigor being the same species as Kevin, who's revealed to be an alien species called an Asmosian. All this culminating in Kevin now absorbing the Ultimatrix in order to stop Agrigor in this far more powerful amalgam state. This leading into the Ultimate Kevin arc, where Ben just fully accepts he'll have to kill Kevin in order to stop him, which thankfully doesn't end up being the case, and they drain all the energy from him with the help of some familiar faces. Following this, Ben and the others end up getting involved with the Flamekeeper Circle and a Cthulhu-like god being called the Dagon, who'd make his way back to our reality after being trapped in another dimension. Amongst that, we have Ben meeting another future version of himself who, rather than transforming, can become an ultimate human, tapping into the abilities of each of his aliens to varying results. As well as meeting Eon, who's a evil future Ben from another dimension. But back to the overarching plot. Ben and the others end up teaming against Sir George against Dagon. The team now fighting Dagon and Vilgax, who's acting as a bit of a herald for Dagon, only to end up freeing him before then betraying Dagon, absorbing, again Dagon, into himself. Wanted to see how many times I could say Dagon in one sentence. Ben then taking Ascalon, the sword George had, that turns out was made by Asmuth prior to the Omnitrix. This resulting in Ben now wielding the Ultimatrix, and Ascalon defeating Vilgax once again. After weighing up ultimate power for a moment, Ben decides to give it over to Asmuth along with relinquishing the Ultimatrix. And seeing that, Asmuth deems Ben worthy of the new completed Omnitrix. Jumping forward a bit, our main trio end up splitting up, with Kevin and Gwen going off to college, leaving Ben as a temporary solo act back in Bellwood. In universe, it's probably the better part of a day that Ben's on his own, with Grandpa Max giving him a partner in the recently graduated Rook. The pair of them end up becoming thick as thieves, really becoming a fun little duo. And things really escalate from here. If you thought stakes were high during Ultimate Alien, that hardly compares to what's coming up. We end up seeing the seemingly abandoned ship that once belonged to the Quantumalia, with it containing this MacGuffin, the Annihilag, that creates universes where there aren't any and destroys any where there are. Unfortunately for Ben and everyone really, this is in their universe, and it even goes off. Thankfully, Ben gets Alien X just in time, being immune to it existing outside of space-time. Ben going on to convince the other two personalities to allow him to recreate the universe, though he doesn't get every single detail spot on. From there, there's all sorts of new villains, overarching plots, the Nemetrix gets involved, it being a version of the Omnitrix that can only be worn by non-sapient species, with it containing a bunch of predator species of a lot of Ben's Omnitrix transformations. Creating these really fun dynamics for us, but quite stressful situations for Ben. Surrounding that, there's the return of Malware, that villain I mentioned earlier who took feedback from Ben however many years back, resulting in this enormous face-off on Galvan Prime, with Malware destroying their moon, killing off his own species, absorbing Ben into himself, with that being the catalyst for Ben re-unlocking feedback and using it to finally end Malware. Then there's all sorts with Albedo making his return with a version of the Ultimatrix. There's another alien invasion, which is much more efficiently done by the Incursions than it ever was done by the Hybrid. We've even got the charming, if flawed little arc with Ben finding himself in the Anor system, the home of all these spooky aliens like Ghost Freak and the Halloween trio I enjoy so much. All this to say, Ben then enters the Time War, with Professor Paradox coming back into the story along with Vilgax and Eon, leading to this huge two-parter with Ben facing off against every evil version of himself before he, along with most all of them, are erased from existence, only to be brought back by the only Ben without an Omnitrix. All that being said and done, Ben gets pulled up by the Celestial Sapiens, Alien X's species, for recreating the universe earlier. All this resulting in a bit of a slap on the wrist for him, but more importantly for Ben, in him gaining full control over Alien X from here on out. Then there's everything that happened with the Rooters, a subsection of the Plumbers whose sole purpose is to destroy Ben, giving us a few retcons revolving around Kevin and the Plumbers kids and what's an Osmosian and what's a mutant, and there's no such thing as an Osmosian except there is, and that's just a synonym for mutant. Then there's more time travel shenanigans with all this leading up to the villain Maltruant, a Chronosapien, the same species as Ben's Clockwork transformation, who after reassembling himself over the course of an arc, ends up back in time on the Quantumalia ship with them still on it. Alongside Ben and Rook who followed him in, Maltruant getting his hands on an Annihilag of his own and setting it off, before Ben throws himself at the explosion and this time catches it. In this incredible sequence of him cycling through almost every single alien we've seen, at least every alien we saw in Omniverse, only to land on feedback, containing the explosion and throwing it right back at Malware, scattering him all across of space and time, leaving him stuck in this never-ending time loop of doing this over and over again. And that's where the series leaves us. From there, Ben would end up with his childhood crush Kai Green, following them reconnecting during everything Maltruant, the pair of them having their own son Ken, and Ben becoming Ben 10,000, the hero of heroes. There's also the possibility Ben would have done this to Vilgax, but I'd say following meeting his future self in Classic, that's pretty unlikely, and that is the entire life of Ben Tennyson explained. If you've made it this far into the video and aren't subscribed, please consider doing so. Either way, I appreciate you being here. Thanks for watching.